Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. So I think we have participants coming very soon. We are having 31 people joining us now. So I think we can take a couple more minutes to wait for them, and then we can start our session today.
Sure. All right.
Thank you for being here with us today.
I'll share my screen, okay?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Is it visible now?
Yes. Can you make it big? Enlarge your slide, please. Yes. Perfect.
Yes. All right. Okay.
All right. That's good.
That's fine, right?
Thank you. So how are you today?
Sorry?
How are you today?
Guys, I'm all good, yeah.
It's not too early, isn't it?
It's 9:30 a.m. in the morning.
All right.
Is that too early for Thailand?
Sorry, 10:30, 10:40 in Thailand right now.
10:40, yeah. Okay. All right. I'm good.
So I think we probably can start our sessions because the time is it's already here.
All right, okay.
Okay. So once again, I would like to good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world, and welcomes all of you to kick off the very first sessions of today's CESRA Talk on soil organic carbon recovery by vegetation succession in abandoned cropland. And the event today is supported by the Center of Excellence for Soil Research in Asia, or CESRA, aiming to provide a dynamic series of online events where experts sharing their insights on the varieties of topics. And each session will last for 1 hour, featuring by the presentations from our speakers, and then followed by interactive Q&As afterwards. So when I say the first CESRA Talk, trust me, this is just only the beginnings, and with more talks to come. And please stay tuned for what's coming next. And my name is Prabha Taranet. I am part of CESRA Secretariat teams, being the host for today's talk. And before we begin, let me share some information for those who may be new to our community, CESRA. So CESRA stands for the Center of Excellence for Soil Research in Asia, and this center serves as a regional hub for advancing soil research based on the regional priorities. We have committed to promote the practice of soil, land, and agricultural management to improve soil health across the region. And our work aligns with the implementation plans of the Asian Soil Partnerships and the Global Soil Partnerships. In this context, member countries of CESRA are mostly countries under the Asian Soil Partnership and the Global Soil Partnerships. This country, they provide the support, the technical support through the steering committee, technical committees, and the working group to CESRA to execute our missions on advancing soil research and building a network of experts and researchers on soil science. So our first CESRA talk today will begin with the topic of critical importance, soil organic carbon recovery by vegetation succession in abandoned croplands. And as we know that soil organic carbon is vital to ecosystem health, influencing soil fertilities, water retention, and also the climate regulations as well. With the increasing land abandoned, the nature begins in a silent mode. I can say that in a silent mode. So to understand how natural vegetation succession can restore soil carbon, it's essential for sustainable land use. So today, we are honored to have Dr. Roshan, Babu, Ojha guiding us through this topic. And Dr. Roshan I would like to give you some information about Dr. Roshan. So I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
No, that's okay. It's
So Dr.
completely
Roshan,
okay.
yeah, thank you. Dr. Roshan is a soil scientist working at the National Agricultural Environment Resource Center and being a part-time lecturer at Purvanchal University of Nepal. And also Dr. Roshan is also a member CESRA technical committees, having worked with us for years, and also being an editor at some journals as well. And his work focuses on soil carbon modeling and dynamics, soil fertility, soil conservation, soil pollutions, as well as soil biodiversity. So as we get into the time, please welcome Dr. Roshan, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pat, for this nice introduction. So, hello, everyone. Namaste. I'm Roshan Babu, soil scientist at Nepal Agricultural Research Council. So today I'll be talking about the soil organic carbon recovery by the vegetation succession in the abandoned cropland. If you see the left side of my left side of this slide, so this is the recently been abandoned cropland. So my interest or my target is to see how the carbon changes in this abandoned cropland after 5 years or after 10 years, and that is led by the vegetation succession. So this is also part of my PhD work. So today I'm going to present this thing. All right. So if you see the globally, why we really need to talk about the abundant cropland, in one of the estimate done by the Leopold et al. In 2021. So it has been mentioned that the majority of the abundant cropland that lies in the Asia, which is around the 30% of the total abundant cropland, which is followed by in the Americas, is mostly in the South America, and followed by in the Africa and in the Europe. So this sort of problem that lies in the in measure of the continent around the world, and in the different set of studies, there's some estimation that in the Lee et al. 2018, he reported that in China, Tibetan Plateau, there are 20% of the cropping land has already been abandoned. Similarly, after the separation of Russia from the USSR, the 40 million hectares of land has been abandoned. And in Europe, there are 128.7 million hectare land has already been abandoned. And the rate of cropland abandonment is rising. So these sort of things that happens around the globe, and particularly in the Asia, we also have the largest share in the cropland abandonment. So if you talk specifically to the Nepal, so it have the 20% of the total land use, that is the cropping land, and out of these 27% land, so 35% of these total cropping land has already been abandoned in Nepal. And this sort of problem that existed in the middle hill zones of the Nepal. So you have the three major ecozones, that the plain area that's around the 500 meter above the sea level, and we have the mid hills around the 2000, and above that is the high hills. And we have the very unique agro ecosystem. We cultivate around up to the 3,000 to 3,500 meters above the sea level. So we witnesses this sort of abandoned land, cropland abandoned land problem, majority in the medial region of the Nepal. However, this problem existed in the lower plains and in the high hills as well. And this is one of the most emergent significant problem that seek for the potential restoration option. So I'm trying to dig out some of the drivers of cropland abandonment in Nepal. So here I have listed more than around 20 cropland abandonment. So the major thing, the major cause is the out migration. So measure of our agricultural force, agricultural labor, they're out migrated. So that increases the labor cost and there is the labor unavailability. And the farming communities, they now have the access to the non-farm income, and also there's an increased access to the education. So these sort of things that likely to people leaving the agricultural leaving the agricultural activity, and the agricultural land is abandoned. So there are several other factors as well, biophysical factors, such as there is a low agricultural productivity, there are lots of the natural hazards, there are lots of climate disaster. There's I already mentioned that we cultivate up to the 3,000 or 3,200, 3,500 meter above the slope. So some sort of unsuitable topography or slope. So and there's a high input and production costs. There's a lot of land fragmentation issue. There's a lot of land degradation issue as well. Irrigation unavailability, the remoteness, the distance between the farm and the residential area, and there are certain defect in the land use policy as well, and there is limited access or and there is a there's a wild animal encroachment in the farm, some sort of market inaccessibility is there. The youth, they are very disinterested in the agriculture, and some of the changes in the biophysical setting of the land. And so agriculture is somehow technical job, so there's a loss of certain lack of technical know-how. So these sort of problems or these sort of issues, this sort of driver that increase the rate of abundant cropland, the majority of the things that relies on these top of these measure of the issues. So if you think, if you see the drivers of the cropland abundant around the globe, so the China, they have their one specific cause. So in Europe, they do have some sort of environmental issues, and similarly in China, or in the in the Tibetan plateau in the China, they do have some of the environmental or land degradation issues. But if you see the causes or drivers that revolves around within these causes. So in particular in Nepal, we do have this out migration and labor shortage issue that primarily drives the Nepal's agricultural land into the cropland abandonment. So if you see the impacts, so broadly the impacts of the cropland abandonment, it can be categorized into the physical impacts and the socioeconomic impacts. Again, these impacts further dissected into these things. First, if the cropland in abandonment, the majority of the land that goes into the vegetation succession, definitely if there is low, if there is cropland is abandonment, the agricultural production is, the overall production is low. So, and there is an invasive plant species for wild animal encroachment in the cropland area, and definitely the increase in the food insecurity if there is low production. And there's also chance of soil erosion and the landslide, and that followed the land degradation, and that also change in the labor dynamics or labor intensity, and people are slightly shifting into the non-farm businesses. And we do have a lot of terrace and bond collapses issues in the cropland abandoned area. And definitely if there is the out migration, the male force, so there is a change in the gender roles in the farming families and farming communities or agrarian communities. And definitely there is a change in the cropping pattern, and there's a loss of the agricultural opportunities as well, because people are shifting to other non-farm businesses. And there's a decrease in the ecosystem services. Some of the paper, they also highlighted about this decrease in the ecosystem services, but that mostly linked with this erosion and landslide and land degradation issues. and change in the farm tools and technology. The previously we used the wooden plow. Now they are shifting into the power tillers, and definitely there is a decrease in the soil fertility and soil organic carbon issue. So here I'm trying to highlight some of the impacts about the carbon abandonment issues. So if you see here in the figure, the majority of the study, they are not available about the soil organic carbon and soil fertility. What happens? These are lots of issues. When the cropland is abandoned, there are lots of issues. But the majority of the study, they lagged. The 93% of the study, they lagged about the change in the soil fertility or the change in the organic carbon issue. So as a soil scientist, my particular interest that focus on this issue. So these are all the topic that we really need to work on. We really need to find different sort of, policy recommendation with these sort of things. So my particular research interest that lies in this soil fertility or soil organic carbon change that led by the cropland abandonment. So once the cropland is abandoned, so you can see these two typical pathways for soil organic carbon or soil fertility. One is the soil vegetation succession, and next is the land geomorphic damage. So definitely we can see that if there is a vegetation succession, there's likelihood to increase the fertility or so increase the soil organic carbon, and land geomorphic damage that likely to decrease or that likely to decrease the soil fertility. So my prime concern is on the soil fertility issues after soil and carbon issues after cropland is abandonment. So I'm trying to develop my research question around these factors. So I already mentioned that. So vegetation succession is one of the pathways of uh, cropland after the cropland abandonment. So what happens in the vegetation succession? So we really need to know about this. What is the primary vegetation succession? What is the secondary vegetation succession? So the primary vegetation succession that happens with the progress of forest development, or that happens with the forest development of the climate communities. But the secondary vegetation succession happens when there is a disturbance. Like if you think about the cropland, so this is we do a lot of delays. So there's a kind of disturbance, and abundant cropland that provides the opportunity to grow this sort of plant species along the different time frame. So if you see here, within the 2 years, 3 to 4 years, 5 to 150 years, and 150 years, there's a progress of development of these plant species from pioneer species to intermediate species to the climatic species. So up to the 4 to 5 years, we can witness some of the pioneer species such as the herbs or shrubs or grasses that eventually grow up after these years, after 4 to 5 years of the cropland abandonment, and after there, so there's a we can witness the emergence of this immediate species and the climax community after 150 years. So if you see the time frame of our cropland abandonment, the maximum time frame that I have found is around 30 years. So we are somewhere here in the insurgence of these intermediate species. Still our cropland abandonment, they don't have the climax community. But if you see the paper from the China or the Europe or the South America, so they already have this climax community in the abandoned cropland, and we can see the range of these, how the carbon build up in this climax community after this disturbance in that area, in that studies in that areas. So eventually, so this vegetation succession, it builds up the carbon. So why I'm interested in the solar and carbon? I already mentioned that land abandonment that either result in the land degradation or the vegetation succession. If you see here in this picture, globally, so South Asia region, we have the low to medium stock in the solar and carbon, and in Nepal, so majority of our medials, we have the medium solar and carbon content, and in this lower plain Tarai area, we have the very low to very low organic carbon content. So uh, we have very So since we really need to be very serious about the organic carbon content in the soil, because it drives many of the mechanisms. So in the both the processes that affect the soil organic carbon content, and at the current state also we don't have that much organic carbon content. And the carbon, it is the second largest reservoir in the soil after the ocean, 3 times more than in the atmospheric carbon and 5 times more than in the living biomass. So that provides the several ecosystem functions. Also, we have some of the policy. We have the Sustainable Development Goals. We have the 4 per thousand initiative, that is the Paris Agreement. We have the national determining contributors and some of our national policy. That's the agriculture development strategy. These all documents, these all the international national documents, they set target to increase the carbon content of our land. Locally, of course, that contribute to the global organic carbon change, to the 4% level in coming 10 years. Or if you see the agriculture development strategy, that is going to end in 2035. So by 2035, our national target is to increase the organic matter from 2% to the 4% level. So we have really some very optimistic or very ambitious goal to increase the carbon. So in one hand, we have our national target. In somewhere we have the cropland abandonment, and we really need to focus what happens to the organic carbon in this sort of abandoned cropland, or we really need to focus on how to build the carbon in this land. So these are some of the soil and carbon pools that I have used in my study. The first is the light fraction carbon. So the light fraction carbon is the organic carbon that is less than 1.6 gram per cubic centimeter, which we also call it the labile soil organic carbon fractions. And next is the heavy particulate organic carbon, that is as POC, which is again less than 0.16 gram per cc and more than 53 micrometer size. So we can get this as POC fraction by density. We really need to do the same density separation to find this light fraction, and we need to do the density and size fractionation to obtain this heavy particular organic carbon. So it is again the labile organic carbon fraction. And where the particulate organic carbon fraction it is purely a size fraction, which is more than 53 micrometer size, and mostly associated with coarse soil particles, and it is also a part of the labile soil and carbon fraction. So these fractions, they have their different importance in terms of their composition, in terms of their disintegration, in terms of their presence in the soil. However, they all comprised of this labile organic carbon fractions. And next is the mineral associated organic carbon. So this is again the size fraction, which is less than 53 micrometer in size, and it is associated with the fine size fraction, and it is the protected soil organic carbon fractions. And next is the resistant organic carbon fraction in humus organic carbon fractions. These fractions that I have obtained these through the MIR, mid infrared spectroscopy fractions. So these are the fractions that widely used in Australia. And this ROC and HOC, they are the resistant organic carbon fraction or the stable organic carbon fractions. And DOC is the dissolved organic carbon fraction, which can dissolve in the water, and which is less than 0.2 micrometer, and is the most mobile soil organic carbon fraction in the soil profile. So this dissolved organic carbon fraction, it can easily penetrate down into the soil profile and build up carbon in the lower soil profile. So these are the fractions that I have used in my study. So if you see this soil and carbon partitioning, so around the 67% of the total gross primary productivity that in the above ground biomass, and around 33% in the below ground biomass, and root alone contribute to the 16%. So in the global organic carbon estimation, so majority of this soot fraction or the above ground fraction carbon is or above ground proportion of carbon is mostly accounted. So this root fraction or root part of the carbon is less accounted or less considered in these global carbon studies. But here in my research, I'm trying to cover this root root fractions or root contribution of the carbon by different passage species or different in this first period of the cropland abandonment. So these are my three research questions. First, how much soil and carbon is recovered by the vegetation succession in the abandoned cropland? And what level of organic carbon gain can be achieved through the pasture species establishment in the abandoned cropland? I'm trying to establish the pasture in the abandoned cropland and trying to recover the carbon or trying to get the associated gain in the organic carbon in the abandoned cropland. And how does the root of pasture species contribute to the new carbon at the various soil depth at various soil fractions? So I'm trying to answer these three questions. In the first research question, how much SOC is recovered by the vegetation succession in the abandoned cropland? For this, I measured the carbon fractions after the vegetation succession in abandoned cropland of the Nepal. So this is my objective, to assess the change in soil and carbon concentration and fractions in particularly DUC, dissolved organic carbon, particulate organic carbon, and mineral associated organic carbon, and the total organic carbon stock with different age of abandoned cropland compared by the nearby reference land across the soil depth. So here my assumption, increase in the time of cropland abandonment will increase the soil and carbon concentration, again carbon stock and total nitrogen across the soil depth compared to the cropping land. And the long-term abandonment, more than 10 years, will be on the trajectory towards the soil and carbon profiles to the nearby reference land system. So this is my approach. I use the space for time substitution approach, where I categorize the cropland, existing cropland, abandoned cropland around 5 years, 5 to 10 years abandoned cropland, more than 10 years abandoned cropland, and pasture and forest land in 2 different locations at 4 different depths. And I absorb these sort of nitrogen, organ total carbon, and the different carbon fractions. And I did the 3-way ANOVA analysis and the regression analysis to show the significance result. So this is the final result slide. As compared to the existing cropland, so in the first 5 years of the abandoned cropland, you find a decrease in the organic carbon content. So it is because the inherent solar carbon is mineralized, and there is a less carbon input in these first 5 years, and there is a disintegration of the soil aggregates, and we found the evidence of the SOC loss. Though we assume previously there's a build of a carbon after the cropland is abandoned, but our assumption failed for the first 5 years. So in these first 5 years, we also witnessed some sort of land geomorphic damages. I think that also contribute to this SOC loss. And also there is evidence of some sort of regeneration, vegetation regeneration. And after the 5 years, there's a pioneer species, the dominance of the pioneer species, and the carbon slowly build up after 5 years. And after the 10 years, there is more than around 60% SOC is recovered in this land. But the interesting things here is the change in the carbon fractions. In the first year, we see a very significant drop in the particular organic carbon fraction, which we again achieve in the second in the 5 to 10 years of cropland abandonment after the pioneer species succession. So this POC build up very rapidly, because the plant input that contribute this POC fraction. And also the interesting thing is the build up this mineral associated organic carbon fraction. So I haven't shown the DEFAS data here. So if you see the DEFAS disintegration, the POC build up mostly in the top layer soil, and mostly build up in the bottom layer soil. And there's also the production of DOC in the system, and after the 10 years, all these fractions, they tends on increasing, and after 10 years we found the 60% SOC recovery. Sorry. So these are some sort of mechanism why these changes that that we got in this result. So in the 5 to 10 years, the root of annual and biennial sequester more carbon and more proportional change in the PUC than in the MAOC. And after the 10 years, POC, MSC, and DOC formation by root, litter, and root after the vegetation succession that contribute to this increase in this SOC fractions. So if you see the other studies in different other part of the world, they also recommend the same thing. The over the 20 years of cropland abandonment, we found a rate of C sequestration rate around 0.015 per year, with the vegetation regeneration in Nepal and 60% SSC recovery after the 10 years of cropland abandonment. Similarly, this study suggested a nonlinear increase in SOC over the longer term with carbon sequestration in a forested abandoned cropland over 70 years, following the first order kinetic rate for carbon sequestration of around 0.05 per year. So there's the carbon buildup, but that process is really slow, you know. So the rate of carbon accrual in the abundant cropland after the vegetation succession is really a slow process. We can't get that high carbon accrual overnight, but it's a slow and steady process. And this study also estimated that the equilibrium state of soil and carbon state with the forest was achieved after 20 years of vegetation regeneration, and globally revegetated abundant cropland sequestered 1.9% SOC per year in upper depth soil. And we also found different rate of organic carbon accrual after different years of vegetation succession in different climatic zones of other European countries. So this study also showed that there's accrual, but we really need to think about one thing. So whether there is a land geomorphic damage, or whether there is a vegetation succession at what rate, at what species, at what climate, at what soil type, these sort of things that really varies these accrual rates. So my next research question is, what level of SOC gain can be achieved through the pasture species establishment in the abandoned cropland? So the objective of this study is to examine the change in soil and carbon and fraction with the sown pasture species in the abandoned cropland. And the assumption are sown pasture species will increase SOC during early stage of cropland abandonment, and pasture establishment will restore the soil condition of the abandoned cropland through the increased SOC through the whole soil profile, and is an option for the abandoned cropland restoration. Here I am trying to see, because I see the decrease in organic carbon in the 0 to 5 years of cropland abandonment. So what I think, if we can really establish the pasture, can we retain that carbon, that lost carbon? So that what I am trying to see in this study. For this, I have done the field experiment in the randomized complete block design, where I planted these 4 different pasture species in 2 different seasons at 4 different depths. And we observed this organic carbon, particulate resistant humus fraction, and several root density parameter and plant height. And we did the 3-way ANOVA analysis, regression analysis in the RStudio. So here, I'm really not trying to explain this result in terms of the species, because this is not of the primary interest here. The primary question here is whether the pasture species can retain that carbon after the in the first 5 years of abandoned cropland or not. Here, definitely, if you see the root density, we found the higher root density in the upper depth. That's very obvious compared to the other soil depth. And the interesting thing here is definitely the organic carbon that decreases with depths, but in terms of the pasture species, we see this stable carbon fraction, humus organic carbon and the resistant organic carbon fraction. They tend to increase in the lower depth, but the level fraction that decrease with the depths. So if you see the proportional change to this total SOC, so the stable carbon formation in the lower soil depth, and the level carbon formation that happens in the upper soil depth, that is attributed by the pasture roots. Here I'm really trying to see the root density, and we have also done the correlation analysis, and we found this significant correlation of this increase in level fraction at the upper depth and the significant correlation with the root density with the increase in this stable fraction at the lower soil depths. So the proportion of this in proportion of this total SOC, uh, POC is more in 0 to 20 centimeter depth, and HOC and ROC is more in the lower up to the 60 or 70 centimeter soil depths. And the third research question about the how does the root of the past species contribute to add the new carbon at the various soil depth. Now, what I think, so we have the carbon content that decreased in the first 5 years, and after the past establishment, we retain that carbon, but the level carbon in the upper depth and the stable carbon in the lower depth. So here I am trying to see what is the new carbon, you know. So what exact amount of new carbon that we get from the past roots. So that I'm trying to elucidate some of the mechanisms of carbon accrual. For this, these are the certain objectives and the assumption. For and the activity the I've done the greenhouse experiment in the complete randomized design. Again, I use the same four passage species in two different soil types. The chromosol is the sandy soil, and ferrosol is the clay soil at five different depths: 10, 20, 40, 60, and 70 centimeter, five different depths, the similar to the field experiment. And I have observed the plant height, root density, total soot biomass, root soot ratio, soot carbon content, root carbon content, soot nitrogen content, root nitrogen content, total organic carbon content, light fraction, heavy particle organic carbon fraction, dissolved fraction, mineral associated organic carbon, root and soot delta 13 carbon, and soil delta 13 carbon, and associative fraction delta 13 carbon in per mil. So with this observation, I'm trying to answer this question: how much amount of new carbon is actually contributing at what soil depth, at what soil carbon fractions. So again, I'm not going to present this result with different plant species. The overall summary of this result is definitely the plant height or the soot biomass that goes up increasing as time passes. And the root density here is very interesting thing. Root density in the sandy soil and in the clay soil, we get a bit higher root density in the sandy soil compared to the clay soil. We have done this for only one single season. So I'm really not sure about this clay soil, because the real soil is really compact and we can't get that much of root expansion, root penetration in this clay soil. And the soot biomass, again, this soot biomass, they definitely we get the different soot biomass for different species, different parts species. Here, the interesting thing here is the carbon change in the solar carbon fraction change. Here, there's not that significant difference in between the sandy soil and clay soil for this light fraction. But this heavy particular on carbon fraction is significantly different in these two different soil types, clay type and the sandy type. So there is more build up this heavy particular organic carbon fraction in the sandy soil compared to this clay soil at all soil depths. And again, the dissolved organic carbon production is higher in the sandy soil compared to this clay soil. And the mineral associated organic carbon is not that significantly different among the species. But if you see that speciation, because in Australia, we really need to find out which species is contributing to which fraction. So that we have done this species level, pasture species level interaction as well. That's a separate recommendation. But here I'm trying to answer the pasture species, whether the pasture species contributing to the different fractions of carbon or not. So that's why they all the pasture species, they build this mineral associated organic carbon content. So in terms of carbon, C4 carbon input by the roots, so all these species, all the pasture species, they build the new C4 carbon in the sandy soil, but the new C4 carbon only build up in the top soil, 0 to 10 centimeter in this clay soil, clay texture soil, not in other depths. But all new C4 carbon that we found in all the soil depth in the sandy soil. The very interesting thing here is in the sandy soil, the proportion of new carbon, C4 carbon, is found in only in this DOC and MAOC, or this dissolved organic carbon and mineral associated organic carbon fraction in the stable carbon fraction pool. But in the ferrosol, again, the proportion is high in DOC and MOC. However, we found some build-up in the SPOC and LF, light fraction or level fraction as well. So from this study, what we can find that if you plant the pasture in the abundant cropland, that likely to contribute to the stable carbon fraction, stable carbon pool. That's why plantation of the pasture species is really a good way to stabilize the carbon in the abundant cropland. So my synthesis is secondary succession in the abundant cropland of Nepal added the SOC significantly after 10 years with the slow rate of carbon accrual, and the trajectory of solar and carbon gain was towards the forest and pasture. Pasture establishment contribute to build the solar and carbon in the abundant cropland, which was mostly driven by the level organic carbon fraction in the topsoil and stable associated fraction in the subsoil. That depends upon the root density, depth distribution, live root inputs, DOC production, and the soil types. And the addition of new carbon by the pasture species roots is largely fixed in the MOAC and DOC pool, then light fraction and the heavy particular organic carbon fraction, which signifies the pasture establishment in the abundant cropland promotes the stable associate formation. So this is the conceptual framework that I have developed. So what happened? So you can, I'm not going to describe all of these things. So what happens? The associate change. We witness the loss of carbon, but if you plant pasture somewhere here, we can, we can protect the associate loss, and so that we can rebuild or regain the carbon, or we can get the associate recovered faster. So even in the previous studies, the revegetated land or revegetated abundant cropland, the associate accrual rate is really high. So that contribute to the several mechanism, and all of these species or all of these ecological process and mechanism are going happening, and that really build up the carbon in the abundant cropland after the vegetation succession. So we conclude that the pasture establishment enhances the stable associate formation in abundant cropland at lower soil depth and should be considered as the component of abundant cropland restoration. So I'd like to thank my university, University of New England, IPR Scholarship, Nepal Agriculture Research Council, farmers and field assistants, CESRA Secretariat, and all of my family members for providing me this opportunity to present my work here. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you for listening to me as well. Now I'm open for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roshan, for that incredibly insightful presentations. And for those who have questions, once again, if you have any question, please raise your hand so I can see you. True, or otherwise you can type your questions into the questions and answer chat so I can pull them up later. So I think I can start with my question first while waiting for other people. So did you study account for differences in SOC recovery rate in different soil type? I know that you did mention a little bit about the soil type, different, but do you have the study on that as well?
Yeah, I have done that. I have the three different type of studies. The first is the land use assessment. The second one is the field experiment, and third one is the greenhouse experiment. I have considered the soil type in the greenhouse experiment only, but not in the field experiment, because that again, I have planted the pasta especially in the abundant cropland, and I only see the change in the carbon fraction in the abundant cropland. But I'm trying to see whether the soil types really differs in the SOC accrual or not in two contrasting soil, sandy soil and the clay soil, and I find the differences.
Okay. So do you think this can be applied into the broader scalability, like in the broader ways at the global levels as well in this perspective?
Yeah, if you see in the broader scale or in the broader sense, I think I have proposed some of the mechanisms, so that can be applied as a global knowledge in terms of mechanism. But again, if we think about the carbon accrual process or carbon buildup process, that that depends upon the specific to the location and climate and soil types. So that the mechanism we can use that mechanism as a global knowledge.
Okay. So for the farmers or the government, would you recommend to planting the native succession species or just allow them to be like naturally regenerations? So I'm talking
That's a
about the
very
farmer or the government side.
yeah, that's a very tricky question. But yeah, I think if you leave the abundant cropland or if you leave any land for the natural succession, you are likely to get the SOC accrual or SOC rate at the very slow rate. But many of the revegetated land, the careful revegetation that helps to build up the carbon. That's why, mm, depending upon the circumstances, the local government or the government of each country, they can also go for the pasture reestablishment in that type of land. Even in some of the Western countries, they they recommend to establish the pasture for the short term, even in the ongoing cropping rotation. So pasture establishment is really a useful tool. So we really need to think about integration that into our cropping system, into our cropping rotation, and even in the abundant cropland that helps a lot. And in Nepal, the pasture cropping is one of the evolving business as well.
So I have a question from Thailand.
Okay.
In Nepal, do you have a policy measures that can encourage landowner to preserve the abandoned cropland from carbon sequestrations rather than converting them into the other use? Do you have any policy measure for that?
Yes, definitely. So I already also mentioned that in my slide as well. We have the agriculture development strategy that aims to increase the organic carbon content or organic matter content from 2% to 4% in the cropping land. But the abundant cropland is a recent issue, a recent national issue. So we have the different tiers government. So different tiers government, they have their own policy to encourage farmers to revisit that land or to recrop that land. The policy are building up, but our local government and our provincial government, they are making some sectoral policies in their own areas so that they can rebuild or revegetate or recrop or reutilize that abundant cropland.
But how can those people balance the benefits between abundance or convert them into the use? How
Uh,
they balance it?
so you mean that how the people or how the farmers are benefited
Yeah.
those Could you please repeat your question?
I mean, how the communities or the policymakers balance the benefits of the abundant cropland recoveries with the economic pressures, or how can they balance it to repurpose that, cultivate it again?
Yeah,
How they calculate that?
yeah. So, yeah, this issue, this is really a very pressing issue in Nepal. In one way, there's a cropland is abandoning, and next way, we really need more food for the growing population.
Ah,
So the government, they're really encouraging, they provide some sort of incentive to. Previously some of the government, they apply the land taxation system. Those who leave their land abandoned, the land tax are really high, but that really not worked out very well. So that punishment system really not work out very well. And later they give some sort of subsidy. So those who are going to revegetate land or recultivate that land, they provide some sort of subsidy, and they also invest in some sort of agriculture mechanization, because the major issue is the shortage of the labor. So they are also providing some sort of subsidy in the agriculture mechanization, and in that way they are trying to recultivate that abandoned cropland.
Okay, so I have a questions from the chat. The first one from Miss Ganopalat. Do you think natural restorations is effective enough in restoring soil fertilities compared with managed restoration methods such as cover croppings, applications of organic fertilizers?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I think natural restoration or the vegetation succession, if you again that depends upon the what sort of climatic condition that your natural succession and natural restoration is happening. So if that is in the cold or in the Arctic type of climate, the accrual is really not very well enough. But in the hot and humid climate system, that likely to increase the rate of organic carbon content. But again, with with the amendment of the organic carbon content or amendment of the organic manures, we are likely to get more organic carbon than that of the natural succession. That what I believe from my other study experiences. So management, the careful management is really crucial if you really want to increase the organic carbon content in such type of land.
Thank you for the answerings, for the response. So the second question, after 10 years from Ms. Narukamon, after 10 years, what do we do next after the soil has been properly replenished with organic carbon? Is it a good idea to grow cash crops?
Yeah, although it's a reutilization of or recultivation of that land is really important. But again, if you build up the carbon and if you again do the soil disturbance, there is likely to loss of the soil organic carbon content. That's very obvious things. But what we found that in Nepal also, many of the cropland more than 20 years or more than 30 years, they are recultivated back. So yeah, we can do the recultivation even in the cash crop or the food crop or whatever. We can do the recultivation, but again with the careful management practices.
That's really tricky questions.
Yeah, of course.
So I think okay, and I think we are running short of time because it's already almost an hour. So we can take one question. If anyone want to ask some more questions, one question is allowed for now. Otherwise, I probably if Dr. Roshan want to say something, the 1 minute for like conclude anything, add some
There's
more
one
information.
question there, right? There's one
Oh,
question.
yeah, right, Mr. Oh, thank you for the questions, Mr. Nisho. Thank you for the presentation. Is there high risk of carbon loss if abandoned lands are recultivated due to the land pressures? How critical is this risk?
Yeah, I already mentioned that. Thank you, Nichal, for this question. That definitely risks of carbon loss if we recultivate that land. So we get the carbon accrual after the certain years, and if you recultivate land, there is a soil disturbance, and then there is a chance of carbon loss. But again, so what sort of management practices that we really bring up into the soil? If you really go for the zero tillage, or if you really go for the low soil disturbance cultivation technology, and the risks are really low. But again, if you go that for the, somewhere the practice is that they burn the abandoned, all the shrubs and other things, and then they plow the land repeatedly, and then they recultivate the land. In that case, the risk is really high. So we really need to think about the choice of the cultivation technology. so that we can reduce the risks of the carbon loss.
Thank you for your response, and I think we probably done for the questions. If anyone want to have more questions, you can send an email to Dr. Roshan. I think he will be happy to reply you back with more information.
Sure.
And we probably we will share the slide through our websites as well. So at this stage, I would like to express our sincere thanks to Dr. Roshan for sharing your knowledge, and to all of you for the questions and active listenings. And as I did mention before the session start, and this is the first CESRA talk, and we have exciting lining up ahead. So if today's discussion inspire you, we will love your support, and whether through the collaboration, sharing some idea, or joining our activity, doing some presentation like Dr. Roshan did today, or whether you being a part of several movements, so your participation today is exactly what we wanted and what makes CESRA work possible. So together we can build where the healthy soil sustain healthy communities. And thank you, Dr. Roshan, once again, and thank you everyone. Thank you all, and see you in our next talk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Very important.